to go around the world and talk about it, and that is the ability to sit and create a somewhat comprehensive argument about why privacy matters. And why it matters not as a kind of luxury that we should think about fulfilling once a whole variety of other needs are fulfilled, but as something that is really fundamental to what it means to be human. And the reason why I was so excited for that opportunity is because it's not actually an easy argument to make. There are a whole variety of other concerns and deprivations that, for very understandable reasons, strike people as more visceral and immediate, like the need for a job and for health care for your children and the ability to feed your family. But privacy is actually something that is actually not a luxury. It's something that is embedded in what it means to be human and always has been across time periods and across cultures. And one of the argument that typically gets made most commonly to deny this fact is one that I'm sure that you've heard so many times, which is the argument that says that I am not one of the bad people. I am not somebody who's doing anything wrong, and therefore I actually don't have anything to hide. I don't really mind if the government or anybody else surveils what I'm doing because I'm not doing anything that I shouldn't be doing, and therefore don't have anything to hide. This mindset was expressed in its purest and probably most repugnant form by Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, who was asked about all the different ways that his company is enabling massive amounts of information to be known about private individuals that they don't want known. And what he said in the 2008 interview when asked about that was, he said to the interviewer, well, the way I look at it is, if you're doing something or saying something that you don't want other people to know about, that's a pretty good sign that you probably shouldn't be doing it. That's really the mindset that has become the leading reason that people are dismissive about privacy. Now, this Eric Schmidt actually said that about a year before he directed his company Google to cease speaking to the digital news magazine CNET, because CNET published an article containing all kinds of private information about Eric Schmidt that ironically they gathered from Google. Believes in the idea that privacy is worthless and that the only people who care about it are those who have something to hide when he's talking about other people and not himself. And that's really illustrative, because this is the thing that's most striking to me about this debate, which is the people who say that, who say, I really don't mind if people invade my privacy and surveil what I'm doing because I don't actually have anything to hide. Those people do not believe what they're saying. They don't believe what they're saying, and I have proof of that, which is that those very same people put passwords on their email and social media accounts, and they put locks on their bedroom and their bathroom doors. And they do all kinds of things to make sure that they can go into the world in various places to do things without other people watching. In fact, every single time, literally every single time, I've done so many debates around the world over the last year, every single time somebody has said to me, whether it's a media person or just some person who walks up to me on the street or emails me or whatever and says, I really don't mind if people know what I'm doing because I have nothing to hide. I've said the same thing to them every single time. I've said, here's my email address. I write it down for them and I give it to them and I say, what I want you to do is, as soon as you get home, email me all of the passwords to your email account and your social media account so that I can just read through everything that you're saying and doing and just post under your name whatever it is that I feel like publishing for any reason. And I have not had one single person take me up on the offer. Not a single person. I check my email box constantly. And the reason for that is that even the people who say that they don't value privacy understand on an instinctive level why privacy is so crucial to who we are as human beings. We are social animals. We do need interaction with other people. We need other people to hear what we're saying and to know what we're doing, which is why a lot of people voluntarily put some information about their lives online. But just as essential to human freedom and to what it means to be human is the ability to go somewhere in the world and have a place where we can think and choose and be and explore without judgmental eyes being cast upon us. There was this really amazing event, which took place in July of 2013, when the best friend that the NSA has in the United States Congress, your state inexplicably and indescribably hated Senator Dianne Feinstein. I hope I didn't instigate that. That was something I said. But she came out in response to the story that we published about the NSA's collection of everybody's metadata and wrote an op-ed saying, not only is there nothing wrong with this, she said, I find it outrageous that people are even calling this spying. I mean, it's not like we're reading anybody's email or listening to their telephone call. All we're doing is collecting the list of everybody who's talking to everybody else. Why would anyone consider that spying? Now, aside from the fact that her claim was a complete lie, the US government routinely reads the emails and listens to the telephone calls of American citizens without warrants. The thing that made it so amazing that she said that was there was instantly online this campaign to demand that Dianne Feinstein be true to her word. And that if she doesn't really think that metadata, as she calls it, which is the collection of the list of everybody with whom we're communicating, is an invasive form of spying, every day she should go and post online or have one of her 8,000 assistants at home or her office do it for her, the list of all the people with whom that day she emailed and telephoned and with whom she met. And of course she would never do that, because those lists are incredibly revealing about who we are and what we do in the most intimate realms of our life. If you think about what the government can learn about you, not by reading your emails or listening to your telephone calls, but even just knowing the patterns and the lists of the people with whom you communicate, think about what they can discover. If you're a woman who calls an abortion clinic, or somebody who calls a physician specializing in HIV treatment, or if you call a drug or alcohol clinic or a suicide hotline, or if you speak to somebody regularly at night who isn't your spouse, somebody collecting the list of all the people with whom you're communicating will know an enormous amount about your most invasive and intimate realm, oftentimes even more than they'll learn if they're listening to your telephone calls, which can be cryptic, your email communications, which can be quite stunted. They will know incredible amounts about everything it is that you're doing. And the reason most of us react instinctively in a way that we find repellent to the idea that that information is being collected about us, not because there's evidence we've done something wrong, but because there's indiscriminate, suspicionless surveillance taking place, is because we all understand why it's so crucial that we have a realm where we can go and not have other people watching what it is that we're doing. There's all kinds of social science evidence that's fascinating. But I think even more compelling is our own personal experience that tells us that when we think that other people are watching and judging what we're doing, the range of options that we have behaviorally diminishes greatly. It is a natural human reaction when you think somebody is watching what you're doing to engage in behavior that is more compliant and more submissive and more obedient and more passive, because we all as human beings want to avoid human condemnation and societal shame. It is a society where we're always being watched, or think we're always being watched, that engenders behavior that is much more passive and much more compliant. That's the reason governments love surveillance, because it keeps a population in line. It is only when we have a realm that we can go to where we think that nobody is watching can we really explore without hesitation, or without boundaries, or without limits. The private realm is the realm in which creativity and dissent and exploration and human freedom exclusively reside. And so a world in which we allow our government to literally eliminate the private realm is a world in which true human freedom is dramatically limited. Now, I just want to say one more thing about this idea that if you aren't doing anything wrong, you have nothing to hide. It's sometimes easy to kind of scoff at this claim, but it actually has some really pernicious consequences. If we accept this idea that the only people who care about privacy are people who are doing something wrong, then essentially what that means is that the quest for privacy, the desire for privacy, comes to be regarded as evidence that you are suspicious. This is actually how the NSA thinks now. They look for people on the internet who use encryption in their email and view those people as prime targets, as prime targets for their belief that someone's doing something wrong. It's evidence of suspicion, of suspiciousness, on the grounds that if you want to hide something from the NSA that you're doing and saying, then, as Eric Schmidt said, that's probably evidence that you're doing something really wrong. And there's this related premise to it as well, which is, you know, I've heard so many times over the past year the kind of related idea that says, I don't really think that I'm doing anything threatening. I don't really think that I'm that interesting to my government, and therefore I'm just not really worried that I'm the target of surveillance. This is a really common mindset. The very first week after I did my set of stories from Hong Kong, I appeared on MSNBC on Lawrence O'Donnell's show. And I remember at the end of the interview, after he asked me a bunch of snide questions, he said, you know, he kind of like pronounced his judgment on the collection of stories that had been unveiled over the prior week. And he said, you know, Glenn, I've been listening with a really open mind. You know, that's what he does. He's very open-minded. And he said, I've considered all the evidence really carefully. And, you know, I have to say, I've decided that this just doesn't bother me. Like, I'm just not concerned at all that the government is interested in invading my communications. And I remember at the time reacting with an extreme amount of irritation to what it was that he said. I mean, even like much more irritation than I normally experience when I hear Lawrence O'Donnell talking. I didn't really understand why it was that bothered me so much. And then maybe a month later, there was a column in the Washington Post by Ruth Marcus, the longtime Washington Post columnist, who said something very similar. She said, I don't even think there's any chance that the government is interested in my metadata. I'm just not worried about it. And then maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, Henrik Hertzberg, the very good Democratic progressive who writes for the New Yorker, said something essentially similar. He said, the risks of surveillance, the dangers of surveillance, to me are really remote and abstract. They're not things that really bother me. And the reason that this then became clear to me is because I started thinking about what those people have in common. Lawrence O'Donnell goes on television every night and talks about how the people who run the U.S. government are absolutely wonderful people and defends them from all criticism. That's what he does every single day. Ruth Marcus does pretty much the same thing. Her husband is a top-level or former top-level Obama official who chaired the Trade Commission. And Henrik Hertzberg also is a very good, loyal American who defends what the U.S. government is doing. And so what it became apparent to me was that there's this implicit bargain in what these people are saying, which is, if you make yourself completely unthreatening to the U.S. government, if you don't challenge anybody who wields any meaningful power, then you don't actually have to worry about being targeted with surveillance. You will be safe. And this is a really dangerous bargain to accept and to tell people that they ought to consider accepting, because it is always true in every single oppressive society, even the worst tyrannies, that the people who accept that bargain, who make themselves unthreatening to those in power, are never targeted with oppressive measures. I mean, in Mubarak's Egypt, the people who ran around being the Lawrence O'Donnells of the world and talking every day about how great Hosni Mubarak was, or who just stayed in their homes and made themselves unthreatening and didn't join the protests for democracy on the street, weren't the people who were put in prison and tortured and killed. It was the people who were actually posing a challenge to those in power who were doing that. And ultimately, the measure of how free a society is not how it treats its Lawrence O'Donnells and Ruth Marcuses and Henrik Hertzbergs and other people who decide to make themselves unthreatening. The true measure of how free a society is how it treats its dissidents, the people who want to make themselves. And if you go into American Muslim communities and talk to the people there, or if you go into the organizers of the Occupy movement, or people who work for transparency online, or other groups that are actually posing meaningful threats to orthodoxies in the prevailing order, you will never hear anybody say, oh, I'm not at all worried about that. And I think this is really a crucial point, is that we should not be comfortable or content in a society where the only way to remain free of surveillance and oppression is if we make ourselves as unthreatening and passive and compliant as possible.